Okay, so what we'll cover over the course of this lecture is a bunch of topics related to Google's advertising and related systems. So, we'll talk today about revenue models. We'll start in on that. Eventually, we'll get to fraud detection, push that off probably till next week. Talk about APIs, application program interfaces. Those, when I talk about how some systems or some two applications have an interface, this is exactly what we mean. So that's what those are. And eventually, we'll talk about Google supporting database systems, which the advertising system is built on. So let's just get into it. Uh, as far as Google's advertising, well, a lot of people think of Google as being primarily a search engine service. Some people might even think of it as being very important in cloud, which is true, right? Aside from G Suite that we use at UIC, of course, Google's cloud, public cloud is second only to, well, third to Amazon and Microsoft. So it's pretty big. And of course, it's you don't hear about it as much lately these last few years, but it has been a pioneer in self-driving cars, all of which are important and worthy things. But more than anything else, Google is just the world's biggest advertising operation. So over 200 billion in revenue, even a few years ago, obviously more now. And what makes that especially interesting is that Google doesn't even design the ads, right? They're like online billboards. They decide which ads should go in which places, and they make bags and bags of money from that. So we'll talk about it. So Google's basic model is to get users for the search engine, right? Google delivers high quality search results. Thus people want to come back and keep using it over and over. So once the problem of getting good search results is solved and the problem of getting customers to use Google is solved, then the next step is to pick ads that can be shown along with those search results, right? And showing them along with the results. So the idea is when users click on the ads, then Google gets some money. The advertiser says, "Thank you, Google," and sends them a check. Okay, that's the basic pay-per-click model. So the big questions there, number one, figuring out which ads are well aligned with which search terms, right? Which ones make sense to show. Uh, in the early days, this was done basically by using keywords. For example, the advertiser would suggest a bunch of terms, search terms where it would be sensible for the ad to appear, and Google would tend to show those ads along with them, with those search terms, right? But of course, with that kind of tagging model, eventually you have a lot of ads chasing the same small set of search terms, right? There can potentially be many more ads than, many ads for any particular search term. So then Google's next step is to figure out, well, okay, how do we pick which ad should be shown at which time and with which terms? And you might think that, well, it's simple, just pick the one that gets clicked on the most. But what Google really wants to do is maximize its long-term revenue. And so just clicks isn't quite enough. We'll talk about that in a moment. And finally, setting the right price for clicks, right? If you go with a flat rate, of course, there are going to be certain cases where advertisers are happy to pay much more for a click, and Google would be leaving money on the table. On the other hand, if Google prices the clicks too high, then they're not going to get much of anything for that. So let's talk. All right. So I'll bring it up in Notepad because that's what we're doing. Oh, I was doing some stuff. Okay, we'll get rid of you. We'll go here. Cancel. Okay. So basic idea for Google is to maximize the long-term revenue from showing ads, right? This in practice means maximizing the expected value of showing any particular, right? Of max for showing some ads with the search results. Okay, so basically Google has a bunch of ads to pick from. They want to pick the one that they think is going to make them the most money, right? And so just going by what's called the click-through rate, right, or CTR, which is essentially the probability of getting a click, isn't enough because an advertiser might not pay much per click, right? Likewise, just going by the advertiser's payout per click isn't enough because why? Because the ad itself might generate very few to zero clicks, right? If the ad isn't getting clicked on, then it doesn't matter how much the advertiser is paying per click because there aren't going to be any clicks. All right, so these are the basic problems that Google has to deal with. And let's see. So what Google does for this is it tries to figure out the product of these two and maximize that. So by maximizing the product, right, probability of a click times the payout or bid per click maximizes the expected value, right? Because that's exactly what expected value is, the probability of the click times the amount you get per click. So you pick the ad that gives that highest value. And of course, some randomization and experimentation is needed because, you know, there might be new ads with no history of clicks, right? There might be trends, there might be changes in the bid rate, there might be changes in the relationship between ads and certain search terms, right? So different things happen. And the other thing, of course, users might have seen the same ad many times. So even if an ad in theory would have a good probability of getting clicks, if the same user has already seen it a bunch of times and never clicked on it, it stands to reason that it's probably not going to be the best ad to show that user for the 10,000th time. So anyway, okay. So that's basically the things that Google's looking at. All right. Now, advertisers can bid for better positioning, right? Having their ads appear at a better place, but there's going to be a cost to that. So we'll talk about that now. All right. So suppose there are two advertisers running two ads on Google, right? Ad one has a click probability of, well, let's say 10% and pays $10 per click, right? So the expected outcome there is 10% of $10 or $1 per display, right? Every time Google shows the ad, Google expects to get $1. Ad two, on the other hand, has a click probability of, well, let's say 5% and pays $20 per click. All right, so same outcome, 5% of $20 is going to again be on average $1 per display. So Google has no really compelling reason to pick one over the other, right? Google might say, well, we're a little bit risk averse, so let's go with the more likely sure thing, which is ad one, right? Going to be more consistent. Or they might say, you know what, let's take a chance. Let's try to max out our revenue a little bit, and we'll go with ad two, because if we get lucky and we get a lot of those 5%, we'll get paid a lot more. But you know, if the same ad gets shown thousands and thousands of times, then chances are it's going to be about the same amount either way. Okay. Now, suppose though that ad one really wants that top spot, right? They want their ad to be shown in the best place. And so they offer to pay $20 per click. Okay. So that means the net expected value for Google is going to be 10% of $20. So that goes to $2 per display. At that point, Google says, yeah, we'll show ad one. Okay. So ad two might pay to keep up. So to keep up, ad 2 would also have to double its click payout to $40 per click to get to that same $2 per display, right? 5% of $40 is going to be $2. Now, this may look like both advertisers are going to pay the same amount of money, right? And over time, yes, they will pay Google the same amount of money. The difference is, okay, so although both advertisers will pay Google the same amount for a given number of displays of their ads, ad 1 will spend much less per site visitor. Okay, so only $20 each as opposed to the $40 per site visitor for advertiser 2. Okay, so that's the difference, is that even though, yeah, both ads are going to be spending the same amount of money, the fact that one ad has a higher quality score means, or a higher probability of being clicked, means that the first advertiser is going to pay a lot less per site visitor. Okay, so that's the diff. That's why, the bids can't go up infinitely. Now, the bidding model in Google is focused around what's called an ad's quality score. So quality score includes a bunch of things, including probability of click, right? But it also includes relevance to search terms. That's like a starting baseline. So all else equal, if Google doesn't know anything about a particular ad and how well it's going to perform, they have that baseline just based on term matching. Okay. And what else? Google can also look at how often an ad leads to a purchase. Now, this might sound like something that Google wouldn't readily have, but in fact, Google offers a web analytics service called Google Analytics, which is very, very popular. All right, so I'll talk just a moment about web analytics. Uh, Google Analytics market share. All right, so as of October 2024, Google has over 80% market share for its web analytics tools, right? If you add up all the numbers here, just Meta and Google alone is about 100%, and you can tack on some of these extras to exceed that. That's because many sites use more than one, right? But 80% of the sites out there are using Google Analytics. What Google Analytics is that when site visitors do things on your website, you track what they do. You also track how they got there and, any purchases they make within what's allowed. So Google Analytics is we'll say free for most users, platform for tracking how customers get to your site and what they do there and the relationships between the two, right? For example, leading to answers like which ads are most likely to lead to purchases, for example. Okay. Now, again, Google Analytics, until you get really big, like you're talking millions of site visits per month, until you get really, really big, it's going to be free. And when you get really big, even what that costs is not that expensive. So, if you have billions of site visitors, Google Analytics, they have what's called 360, used to be called Premium, but Google Analytics 360 costs $150,000 a year last I checked. And if you're making, if you got billions of site visits, well, chances are 150,000 is something your IT budget can pretty easily support. Okay, so that's what Google Analytics is. It is this free web analytics platform so you can see what people are doing on your site. Okay. And one of the things you get from that is, again, how often the ad leads to a purchase. Well, if you have that, Google's platform also has that. So they have that information about it. Okay, so we'll make the note here. Most advertisers who advertise through Google also use their web analytics platform, and thus Google has, you know, some insight into which ads are most likely to lead to purchases, right? And Google knows that advertisers who are getting their money's worth through Google Ads are likely to keep using it. Okay, so that's an important factor in the ads quality score. Okay, because it's one of those things that, well, if people are buying stuff through an ad, that's a lot more important than just an ad getting a lot of clicks and the advertiser paying a lot for maybe not anything at all. All right. So that's pretty much it. That's the stuff we covered there. All right. Well, this is a good point to pause. Let's do a question. I know you all have been sitting here wondering, hey, how long do we have to sit here? When's he going to do a question? Well, the answer is now. Hey, what's happening? That's okay. Nice to have you here. All right, so we're going to do our first question. Dun, 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 dun. All right, so there you go. Okay, question is, Google no longer ranks search results primarily by the PageRank algorithm because why? All right, so take a moment, figure that one out. Good luck. All right, I don't know where all these other people went to. All right, I'm going to do the 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, that's it. End the poll. All right. Glad many of you stuck around for it. Okay, so what's the right answer? Correct. So I'll share the results. The most popular answer is the right one, which is that junky pages could easily be designed to rank high. So what PageRank did is it based a website's ranking on how likely it was that a random user drifting around the internet would end up at that site. So it meant that a website with a lot of pages or that was linked to by a lot of other pages, all else equal, would tend to show rank very high in Google search listings. But the problem with that is that people could build networks of garbage sites that were all cross-linked to each other. And when that happens, then Google's search results end up full of garbage results from these websites, which they don't want. So that's why they had to advance beyond just using PageRank. All right. Now, as far as Google's ad models, there are basically two of them. So Google puts ads on two kinds of sites. Number one, its own sites, right? Or its subsidiaries or close partners. So Google's had some interesting drift over the years as far as which sites are its own. And when Google first started out, it was the company itself was Google. Eventually, Google acquired YouTube, and so at some point they said, you know what, we're going to make a holding company that contains both Google and YouTube and any other companies we might acquire, so that they can all be handled separately in a sense. So, but even though YouTube is technically no longer a subsidiary of Google, it's still a really close partner in that sense, right? It's under the Alphabet umbrella. So anyway, websites like that are considered, very close partners of Google, and in a variety of ways, they're management of the advertising system is highly trusted. On the other hand, you have third-party sites without any close affiliation with Google, and those ones are much less trusted, right? So if you're some random blogger who wants to run ads on your website so you can make pizza money, you're not going to get the same level of trust from Google as if, you're YouTube. All right. So, and that split is again reflected in how Google manages how the various advertising platforms are handled. So, uh, worth mentioning, Google search results, again, they are pure, cannot be bought by advertisers. So what we're talking about here with advertising is specific to ads, right? Any search results that Google shows, they are still ranked according to what Google thinks users actually want to see the most. Anything that's an ad will be either clearly labeled as ad or sponsored so that people know, it's not really part of the search results proper, right? So it's like it's advertisements as opposed to actual search results. Okay, so the two basic models for Google, number one, Google Ads, number two, AdSense. So Google Ads is for advertisers. It's a program where advertisers can send their ads to Google to be displayed on any number of Google's properties or its partner sites. So when an advertiser joins Google Ads, its ads could be shown along with Google search results, could be shown in other places on Google, for example, Google Marketplace, could be shown on websites of close Google affiliates like YouTube, and it could be shown on websites entirely unaffiliated with Google, except for, some sort of operation where they say, yeah, Google can run ads on this site. AdSense, on the other hand, is for content publishers. So if you are someone, you are creating original content for your website, you can join AdSense and then offer to let Google run ads on your pages, right? You can designate some portion of your web page and say, okay, Google, run ads here and try to make money off of that. So uh, in all cases, Google primarily uses the pay-per-click model, or PPC, where advertisers pay for valid clicks on ads, right? So once an ad has been determined to be placed by more or less a real human, as far as Google's best guess, then Google can start paying out, right? The advertiser pays Google, and then in the case of AdSense, Google pays out to wherever the ad is being shown. All right, there are other models we'll eventually talk about. Okay, so the two ad models for Google, right? The two main branches of it for Google Ads. One is Google, the other is not Google. So within Google itself, you have ads shown with search results. Now, search results, first of all, because those ads are shown on Google, of course, the whole process is trusted. Google is not going to try to rip off itself somehow. Second, because the process uses search terms are really reliable in terms of figuring out what people are looking for. For example, if somebody Googles buy a car, you're pretty sure that they're interested in buying a car, right? And that's true for a lot of cases, right? If somebody looks up Halloween costumes, you can be pretty confident they're not looking for the history of Halloween costumes, right? Or why people wear them, that sort of thing. They're actually probably looking to buy something. So search terms are a very good predictor of actual clicks on ads as these things go. On the other hand, there are some aspects of Google that are shown without search. And because it's under Google, still going to be trusted, but it's murkier because it needs some kind of content analysis. It's always going to be harder to match exactly what people things are looking for in terms of purchases because if it's not a search through Google that Google knows is highly correlated with purchasing, it's kind of up in the air what, if anything, people are looking for to buy with that search. So ads shown with search results, the results tend to be substantially better. But even for ads that are picked using content analysis, they can still often do well enough for Google to make money. There's also a note here, you see it in green in the used to be AdWords. AdWords is a program for ads shown along with Google search results when that was actually Google's first one. So when it started up over 20 years ago, that was what there was, and it was a separate program from everything else. But as Google expanded and started being more than, just a search engine and had many more places to show ads besides along with search results, then they started saying, oh, well, this is not as important as it used to be. So let's call the entire operation Google Ads, and then Ad AdWords is just a small portion of that. So it's been kind of absorbed into this big umbrella. So the functions of AdWords still exist, but it's not called AdWords anymore for marketing purposes. All right. The other branch of this is stuff not shown on Google. So close affiliates and other websites. Well, close affiliates like YouTube, yeah, they're going to be trusted. They're all part of the Alphabet umbrella. They're not going to try to rip off Google, we hope. But again, ads shown along with videos do often need content analysis, and it often doesn't work that well. For example, about 10 years ago, my son was a toddler, and one of the things we would do is sit and have him watch. He was really interested in fire engines, as many toddler boys are. And so, I'd queue up some YouTube video of like 5 or 10 minutes of just fire engines racing around with the sirens on. And the ads you would see for that were very often wildly inappropriate for 2-year-olds, right? So, if you just look and you think about it, like a video with fire engines running along, about the only thing that makes sense to show for that is maybe either A, job applications to the fire department, or B, fire engine toys, which I guess maybe they got some traction on those. I don't know. But what I ended up seeing mostly as ads were just ads for movies, right? And many of those movie ads, again, wildly inappropriate for 2-year-olds. Other websites, though, this is the umbrella generally of what's called AdSense that we'll talk about in a little bit as well. AdSense we'll really talk more about on Thursday, next week, I mean, on Tuesday. So AdSense is like a blogger wants to make some money. So he has a blog. On various pages of his blog, he lets Google put in some ads. And uh, because the blogger has a pretty strong incentive to, basically commit click fraud, which is to do phony clicks, right? Instead of just saying, oh, I'm going to wait for actual blog readers to show up and click on an ad. Instead, he fires up his own blog pages and clicks on ads on those pages. He has a pretty strong incentive to do that. And therefore, that's something Google is definitely watching for. So not especially trusted. There's some extra hoops that people have to jump through and some extra scrutiny given to the clicks. They have to be verified as being actual humans, more or less. So, it's least trusted, and again, also often needs content analysis. So, for example, if you are a blogger and you have some interest in some oddball topic like raising pigeons, sure, there's some products you could sell around that, like bird cages and bird feed and bird cage cleaning solutions and such. But it's an open question how much traction you're going to get on that, because a lot of people's interests are not really something you're going to sell a lot of stuff for. So anyway, in any event, you still do often need to do some kind of content analysis to see what's there. It's also true, there might not be a lot of advertisements for whatever the blogger is advertising. So it leads to different outcomes. Anyway, we'll talk about AdWords a little bit and then more or less call it a day here. Okay. So ads shown with search results, formerly AdWords. AdWords, again, is where ads are shown along with search results, thus words, right? And the way the ranking is chosen is number one, as a baseline, figure out the relevance to the ad, relevance of the ad to the term. So back in the day, you might have some tags in the ad to say, oh, this is the kind of ad it is. It's an ad for a car or ad for books or ads for music, movies, whatever. And that would give Google some idea of where to show the ad in the first place, right? So you could get some, so it could be shown appropriately and the advertiser would be happy and Google would be kind of happy. Okay. The other factor, of course, right? So, and over time, the quality score of the ad can change because, Google will get more click history about it, and perhaps people will click on the ad, go to the website, buy some product through the website. all of that is going to help out the ad's quality score as well. The advertiser bids, on the other hand, right? The more the advertiser is willing to pay per click, that's also going to help it get listed higher in the rankings. So, just as search results get shown in terms of relevance, well, at the top of the page is generally the best place to show an ad. So, because, everybody's going to see the ad there. So that's what the advertisers really want. But generally, Google has a lot more ads than space to show them. So it has to pick the best one to be shown in the best spot. Now, over time, what happened is that AdWords initially, it was pretty easy for an advertiser to make money doing using AdWords because there wasn't a lot of competition. All right, so I'll give an example. Suppose it's 2002 and you are a shoe seller advertising through AdWords, and you're the only one in Chicago. So you bid on terms like Shoes Chicago, okay? And it works well for you because there's not a lot of competition for that set of keywords, right? But as AdWords gets more popular and helped quite a bit by free Google Analytics, right? When Google Analytics came on the market in 2005, it was a very big thing because it was a powerful analytics tool. It was directly linked to Google, so advertisers didn't have to do all the computation work themselves, and it was free, right? So it was a great tool at a great price, and suddenly a lot of businesses said, "Hey, I didn't know how I was going to do, how I was going to do online advertising tracking before, but now I can see this is going to work, and I can, track how much money I'm making using it, and which terms are working well and which terms aren't." So all that was great. It was a big bump up for anybody who wanted to use Google. Okay. All right. So eventually what happened though, the downside for advertisers, it gets harder for many advertisers to make money without a lot of thought. Okay. So terms like Shoe Chicago might get bid on by many sellers, leading the, price for the best page position to go way up. So shoe sellers had to start narrowing their term choices to things like men's shoes, downtown Chicago, Michigan Avenue, right? Something like that might be more appropriate. Okay, and then maybe that very closely, expresses how people are going to find your store, and that'll be great for you. Okay, but again, just doing a basic search like shoes Chicago, that's really only going to work if there's a business that gets a lot of sales through that, probably because they're either really big in Chicago or they have a lot of locations in Chicago, one or the other. Okay. So that's what happened with free Google Analytics, right? Because you couldn't share space at the top. There's only space for, a finite set of ads in the best position. Well, in order to rank better with given ads, you had to, number one, redesign your site so that your quality score of your ads was higher. And number two, pay more attention to which search terms are working well for your ads and stop, bidding high on terms that weren't working well for you. Okay. Now, as far as the history of AdWords, let me talk about that. So AdWords actually originated in the year 2000 and outside of Google. Now, what was going on in the world at that time? was the dot-com bust, right? So in the mid to late 90s, there was a lot of buzz around internet companies, right? And everybody knew that the internet was going to be a big thing and that eventually there were going to be a lot of companies selling a lot of stuff through the internet. But in the 90s, people generally did not know which companies were going to be the winner. That was the problem. So what happened is as some of the companies like Google got really big, all the competitors, all the also rans in the field, they ended up vanishing. So a lot of their people, went out on the market. If they were smart, they left the sinking ship before it went underwater, right? So a lot of ideas were floating around at that time. Now, intellectual property theft has a long and glorious history in the realm of information technology. There's been a lot of that over the years. But that's part of it. I'm not saying that Google stole the idea. What I am saying is that Google paid a lot of money to make the questions go away, right? Idea ownership lawsuits settle out of court. Uh, but it's kind of unclear exactly how it played out because number one, a lot of these people knew each other, so they'd get together and talk about what their different businesses were doing, not in great, detail, but they would, of course, they'd get together after work and have drinks or something and maybe say a little bit more than they planned to about what they were working on. The other thing is that in the dot-com bust, people leaving companies, right? Yeah, maybe they sign a non-disclosure agreement, but that's really hard to enforce, right? Especially if, the company they're leaving is on the verge of bankruptcy, insolvency, whatever. Uh, and if all of the documentation inside of Google, is lacking. I mean, Google doesn't really have an interest in setting itself up to you know, get these kind of lawsuits over intellectual property, right? So what can happen is that, yes, they hire somebody who's, just left a company that happens to be working on a similar problem. That guy has some ideas. It's really hard to prove that that particular guy was the source of the ideas. So anyway, that all happened. AdWords, around 2000 is when all this stuff was going on, and AdWords has been around ever since. There are other businesses still similar to this, notably Bing and Yahoo work together to make one. Now, of course, Google no longer uses the AdWords label because it's all been rolled into the Google Ads umbrella, but the function remains, right? Obviously, Google still shows ads along with search results. That's AdWords. Again, so even though for marketing purposes, AdWords no longer exists, in many cases, it's easier to talk about, AdWords than over and over to say, you know, ads shown along with Google search results. Now, once upon a time, it was pretty easy to figure out exactly how much of Google's money came from AdWords. But now it's tougher because, Google is only a slice of Alphabet. Uh, Back in the day, Google would say, "Oh, we get, this much money from ads shown with search and this much money from ads shown with other ways, like on blogs, and, this much money from other sources." It was all pretty well broken down. And you could still find out that stuff, but it is a lot more work. And, the definitions are not as clear as they used to be. But from what they were is around 75% of Google's revenues came from AdWords, which I imagine is pretty similar today. So part of Google's setup is that it's a virtuous cycle. So a virtuous cycle means because things are good, they keep on getting better. And in Google's case, this means Google has done a good job of showing ads of high quality. That means they're, likely to get clicks by users. So because Google has done a good job of showing the right ads to the right people, that means they get a lot of money, right? Their revenues are high. Because their revenues are high, they have more money and assets to reinvest in systems to improve performance. So as an example, suppose Google's making $200 billion a year off of AdWords, which is probably not far off the mark at this point. And suppose they have an idea for a platform that will improve accuracy of their ad selection by 1%, right? Basically meaning their ads will be 1% more likely to be clicked on, so they make 1% more revenue every year. And say the cost of that platform upgrade is $2 billion, right? In terms of algorithms, new hardware, whatever else they might need, it's going to cost $2 billion. Well, if spending $2 billion to make 2 billion every year for the foreseeable future, that's pretty much, a no-brainer, right? That seems like a great idea, especially because most of that 2 billion is probably going to be profit. On the other hand, take an operation like Bing. Bing maybe has annual income around 10 billion. If it costs them $2 billion to make the same upgrade to improve performance by 1%, well, 1% of 10 billion is a tenth of a billion, meaning it's going to take about 20 years for Bing to recoup that money, right? It might still be a good idea, but it's not the slam dunk, we're going to make this money back right away like it would be for Google. All right. Anyway, the other thing that's worth mentioning about this setup is the AdWords framework was designed from the start to adapt to the changing online environment, right? So we'll talk about that on, we'll get the next slide. Okay. Of course, Google wants to maximize its total revenue from whatever ad space it has, right? It wants to make money by showing ads. Now, part of the way it's going to do that is by picking the best ads in the best place. Uh, Well, I mean, it's going to look at the expected revenue from ads, right? But longer term, it's also going to try to figure out which ads are correlated with leading signals, right? So Google might recognize that, hey, we're making a lot of money, or the advertiser is getting a lot of sales through this ad. So even though they're not bidding high now, if somebody else comes along and starts bidding against them, it's going to make a lot of money for us, right? Because that advertiser is going to be motivated to keep up. So even though Google wouldn't have the immediate information that, yeah, this is an ad that they should show a lot, it at least tells Google, we should show this ad some because, going forward, it's going to be good. Uh, One of the concerns that Google saw around 2000, of course, is that the online domain was still getting really big, really fast. There were a lot of new users joining all the time. E-commerce was really just getting off the ground. And so Google said, you know what? It doesn't make sense for us to charge a flat rate for ads. What we should do is set up some kind of system where the advertisers can bid for their best position, and then we can figure out which ad we want to show based on that, right? As opposed to the newspaper model, where you run an ad in a newspaper, it doesn't really matter what the topic of the ad is. It's just going to be so much per unit space. But with online, you see some real differences. For example, some uh, some ad categories that tend to have very high payouts per click, right? Number one, legal services, right? Because if you're looking for legal services, you probably have an urgent need for them. And they tend to be expensive. Okay. Number two, medical services, right? Same. If you're buying them, they probably have an urgent need. They tend to be expensive. But one of the ones that's surprising, perhaps, and also, tends to have really high payouts is life insurance. And the reason why life insurance is particularly high, life insurance is one of those things that a lot of people go through their, most of their life never really thinking about until one day they realize, oh my gosh, I got a wife and kids. I'm gonna need something here, right? I need some life insurance. So when the time comes that people are going to buy life insurance, number one, they probably have an urgent need. They are probably definitely going to buy one, right? Going to buy not only a policy, but a long-term policy. And number three, uh, there are not that many providers, right? So for legal services, especially online, there's any number of different providers, any number of lawyers out there willing to help you. Medical services, in any given city, there are going to be many different providers of medical services. Life insurance tends to be a very uh, very small number of providers that you might want to go with, right? So the odds that somebody's going to go with your particular operation is pretty high. So that's why the advertisers are willing to bid a lot for those clicks. Okay. Anyway, all right. A couple more slides and then we'll do one more question, close it out. So this is just a simple diagram of how AdWords works, right? You guys have, I'm sure, all seen this in real life. You run a search in Google, you get a bunch of search results. Google also takes those search terms, compares the search terms against the available advertisements, figures out which ones are going to be appropriate for that page, considering both the terms and your own recent history. And boom, 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 it sprinkles up the page with ads, right? Hopefully somebody clicks on those ads, and then hopefully somebody clicks on one of those ads and Google ends up getting paid. Okay. For people that are interested in this, I have posted up on Blackboard let's get rid of that. I have posted up on Blackboard an article, Blue Creek Cabins, about a business that started out in the early days of AdWords and went through all of these changes that we talked about. That basically initially they had a really easy time making money. Eventually it got a lot harder to make money and they started having to do different things. And in the end, they were kind of happy because they put more thought into how they would use AdWords as far as what terms they would bid on and how much they would bid on them, and re-engineering the site to rank higher in various ways. So basically the idea was if your site is ranking high in ordinary search, you don't need to pay as much for ads, which is a good thing. Okay. Anyway, we'll talk more about that on Tuesday. So if any of you have time, feel like learning something, then there's that. Because even though it's from a little while ago, the lessons are still the same, right? You could always be some business that starts out with an unusual set of search terms, and then competition rolls in and starts glomming onto those terms, and you have to change how you do things. So even though it's an old story, the concepts can still happen for any business advertising. Okay. Anyway, we got to chat. Oh, that's too bad. If it's not on your, I don't know about that, but I don't know how you're seeing anything if you're on your phone. I hope your viewing is good. I can't really troubleshoot that. Okay. But if you were here, if you chimed in at the time, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt that you were here. Okay. Anyway, so let's do one more question. Hopefully this sorts itself out. We'll do our poll. Okay. I don't want to share that one anymore. Okay. So this is our second question. Which of the following best describes the progression of Google search query processing? Boom. And we're going to launch that. All right. I will add you to the list. Let's see. I had this document somewhere. You guys do your thing. I'm going to do mine. Go to documents. Oh yeah. All right. Whoops. Okay. So I'll add you on for this one. Yeah. All right. I'm going to assume you're here. Okay. Cool. All right. We're going to do the 10-second thing. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and done. Okay, ding, 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 ding. Hey, glad some people showed up at the end. Okay. All right. So we'll end that. Oh, look, a couple more people. All right, I'll give it 3 more seconds. 3, 2, ding. Okay. Boom. Okay, share the results. Once again, good job. This is correct. I'm going to stretch it out so you can all see a little better. So correct progression. Google used to do exact text matches, but now mostly uses semantic matching, right? So 25 years ago, if you search for something on Google, basically you had to have the exact terms there, or it probably wasn't going to give you the results you wanted, right? if you were even if it was something simple like a plural versus a singular. Nowadays, Google tries to figure out what exactly you're looking for and deliver that to you. So it's a little bit of a different operation. Anyway, so the example I give, of course, around Galileo, uh, if you're looking for famous astronomers, and you do a search for famous astronomers, it's not necessarily uh, how am I going to say this? If you're searching for famous astronomers, it doesn't necessarily mean you want to find a page that has the exact words, famous astronomers of the 1600s, right? But the system is smart enough to recognize that Galileo was an important astronomer from, that time, and therefore a page that contains Galileo, ought to perhaps show up in those search results. All right, so that's semantic matching, and Google's built around that now. Yeah, I don't know what the story is with this untitled question, choice one, choice two. I got to figure out. I must have somehow. Oh, I'm sure I somehow included a secondary question in it. So just ignore that one. I'm still learning how to use these Zoom polls. So yeah. All right. Well, that's all I got. Any questions on any of this? Come back on Tuesday. We'll wrap this up. Oh, and I got a new presentation lined up for Thursday, the 21st. So now every Thursday in November, that we have classes, we'll have a speaker lined up. And then I don't know, I'm still working on getting a fourth one. I got some discussions in the works, so we'll see. Hopefully I can get one more. All right. Well, if there are no further concerns, then I guess I will be on my way. It's been a hoot. I'll see you all next time. Happy Halloween, everybody. Yep. Thank you. Yep. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. We'll see you all some other time.